Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is Rustam, and today's topic is critical evaluation of literary texts. I'll be discussing three approaches for critical appraisal of literary texts, which are linguistics approach, literary criticism approach, and stylistics approach. So, in this talk, I will briefly touch upon the structure of literary text or discourse, and then features of literary text. So literary text has a special characteristics. They are different from other text or other communication pieces. Then the terms literary, particularly critical appreciation or critical appraisal. Sometimes we use the word critical evaluation. So these are three synonymous terms, and they almost mean the same. So we will be talking about this. Then what I'll be discussing individually the approaches to critical appraisal, and these three approaches will be discussed: traditional literary criticism, linguistics approach, and stylistic approach. So first of all, before we proceed further, we need to have a basic idea about a literary text, or we also say literary discourse. So literary text or literary discourse uh, can be a piece of poetry. It may be a lyrical poetry or a narrative poetry. It can be a drama, that is drama or play. It can be a tragic play, a tragedy, a comedy. It can be a history play, novel, or a short story, or a piece of prose, like a piece of essay. So all these are known as literary text or literary discourse. Or simply speaking, they are pieces of literature. So each piece of literature has two main components. One is known as content, another one is known as form. So content means the idea or the subject matter or theme or thought. So these three terms are synonymous terms, and form means the linguistic code, particularly the language, then the type of genre, and then the format or design. Like, let's take the example of Paradise Lost. Uh, in its form, it's an epic. So its genre is epic. Definitely, we can also say in format or template, it is an epic, and it is full of linguistic code. I mean, the language, literary devices, etc. So theme or message, or we can say meaning, even meaning or message, it is hidden in the linguistic code. On the surface, what our eye sees is language, words, sentences, syntax, and arrangement of words on the paper. So in this maze of words or linguistic code, uh, uh, beneath this linguistic code lies our message or meaning, or the intended message or meaning. So in order to get at the meaning or content or the thought, we have to pass through the maze of linguistic code. So if the language is a foreign language like English, and we are studying a literary piece written in English, so as a reader, we have two types of difficulty. Number one, that the language is unfamiliar to us. Second is the concept, particularly because a literary piece is usually grounded in a culture. So cultural affiliations may be strange to us and foreign to us, so it is very difficult to understand a piece of literature written in a foreign language. So now in this slide I have talked about two ingredients of a literary text. Let's move on to the next slide. Now in critical appraisal or in critical evaluation, both these ingredients are discussed. A critic, whenever he or she takes up a piece of drama, a literary piece, or it may be a piece of poetry, lyrical poetry, or narrative poetry, so a critic always has a look on both content and form. Both these ingredients or constituents have to be discussed. Their merits and demerits are discussed by a critic. Now, what are the features of literary text? So, we can see that literary text have got a lot of deviations or irregularities, such as lexical deviations, syntactical or syntagmatic deviation, semantic deviations, and graphological deviations. Okay, now as far as the parallelisms are concerned or irregularities are concerned, they relate to sound system, lexical regularities are parallelisms, and syntactical parallelism. So every literary text has got deviations as well as parallelisms. So when we take up a literary piece for critical appraisal or for critical analysis or evaluation, so these items have to be discussed and they belong to form. All these items belong to form or some linguistic code. So the message, meaning, content, thought, idea is embedded in these deviations and parallelisms. If a reader wants to get at the message, he or she will have to wade through this sea of linguistic code. Okay, now I am going to discuss each of these one by one, but I would not rather discuss them at details, because today's topic is just to discuss three approaches to literary criticism, literary appraisal. So first I will talk about deviations. Lexical deviations are paradigmatic deviations. So usually the poets, artists, literary artists, dramatists, playwrights, they are in the habit of inventing new words. Like this is known as neologism. In I think Rape of the Lock, and a mock epic written by Alexander Pope, I think this phrase exists like two-pronged engine. So Pope uses and coins this term for a pair of scissors. And when he wants to talk about fish, he says finny creatures. So such neologisms are found in literary pieces. And usually the literary artists are fond of using lot of Latinism, known as Latin terms. Like instead of saying sun, they may use sol, S-O-L, for sun. Now functional convention, they are in the habit of using verbs as nouns, or nouns as verb. Then special use of words, like figurative use of words. All the figures of speech, particularly similes, metaphors, or long-tailed similes known as Homeric similes. So comparisons and lot of figures of speech are used by the poets or dramatists. Nominal group, like the adjectives are placed in post modification position in usual order, like we say a beautiful book or a very informative book, but poets, dramatists, playwright, novelists may use this they may invert, they may deviate from this lexical word order, and they may say like uh, let's say fallen angel. This is the usual order, but they may say angels fallen, or books expensive book. So this should be the order, but they may say books expensive, people concerned. So these are known as lexical deviations. Then mock theme or fronting. Sometimes words are brought at the beginning of sentences, like of men I sing. So instead of saying I sing of men, so words are brought at the beginning. So these are some of the lexical deviation. This is a very important topic, and but I won't discuss it here in detail. Just I want to give you an idea that all these are features of lexical deviation which are found in literary pieces or literary text. Okay, now graphological deviations. uh, each letter is capitalized, usually in a poetry line, like Emily Dickinson or other, even everyone, rather every poet, when he or she composes a lyric or maybe narrative poetry, so every segment, every line, every phrase is capitalized, which is really an irregularity. Usually we don't do it. So irregular punctuations. uh, Here Emily Dickinson, an American poetess, can be cited. So she is in the habit of using dashes. So this is another deviation. Then right hand margins. So in metrical compositions, these irregularities are found. So they belong to graphology. Okay, then we have syntagmatic deviations, deviations related to syntax. So here are few examples. Poets are in the habit of inverting word order, like down the hill he flew, down the hill he went. The usual word order is subject, verb, and object. Like we say he went down the hill, adverbial. Yes, he went down the hill, but the poets may use it like this: down the hill he went. Or I sing of men, I sing of men. This is the usual order: I sing of men. But this syntax, this arrangement of words can be inverted by the poets or the literary or creative artists. They may say of men I sing. So such deviations are known as syntagmatic deviations. Okay, now semantic deviations, deviations related to meanings. So unusual way of expressing meaning. Here is an example: the child is father of man, the child is father of man. So what does it mean? That is, now here is a kind of ambiguity in the meaning. The child is father of man. Or as have a look at this sentence: lend me your ear. So it can mean it can give us multiple meanings, or there is vagueness and obscurity. So the quality of being open to more than one interpretation or inexactness is known as ambiguity. So poets and literary artists are in the habit of using phrases and sentences in an unusual way. So this way semantic deviation is created. Now, literary texts not only contain deviations or irregularities, they may contain parallelism or regularities. These are known as regularities. Let me take you to some of the regularities. Now, regularity is related to sound. Alliteration, that is, a consonant sound is repeated and a rhythm or musicality is created. One example comes to my mind: how high he holds his haughty head. So each word has H as an initial sound, initial consonant. So it can be, musicality can be created by assonance. So vowels are repeated. Then rhymes. We all know that rhymes, they give very, rhythmic kind of structure to the poetry, and this is poetic composition is identified with rhymes. So these, then meter or rhythm. So in a poetic line, the poets bring in accentuated, unstressed and stressed syllables in a very regular pattern. So the time taken between stressed and unstressed syllables in a line of a poetic line creates musicality and rhythm. So these are some of the parallelism related to sounds. Now, parallelism related to lexes or syntax, and there are many, like refrain, जिस तरह उर्दू में हम रदीफ़ कहते हैं. So this is there. In ancient mariner, there is a phrase, I think, repeated at the end of after some time. Then in Julius Caesar, when Antony gives his speech, I can't remember the exact word, but he uses this phrase again and again. Yes, they all are honorable men. So this word repetition or syntax repetition is done by the literary artists in order to give the text a cohesion. So this cohesion is maintained with the help of repetition. So this is known as parallelism. Now, critical analysis of a literary text. What is this term? So all the terms overlap, or they have synonymous meaning. Like when someone wants to critically evaluate a literary text, so it means that catering to both form and content. Now this word form and content, they are in contrast to each other. So when we say form, so we may mean visible linguistic code and hidden meaning. Hidden meaning again is related to content. So a literary artist may have the content, usually the content or the hidden meaning is the actual thing in a text, but this hidden meaning or content can be approached through linguistic code or form. Like all types of deviations and parallelism versus embedded message or meaning. Again, there is an embedded message and which is hidden, and on the surface are deviations and parallelism. Now, through the maze of figurative language, we have to get at hidden meaning. So we can sum up that a literary piece or a literary text, a literary discourse, a piece of literary worth has language or code and meaning or thought or message. So there are two elements in a literary text. One is language or code, which we can see on the surface on the printed page, and there is another ingredient known as meaning or thought. Now, in a literary criticism, or sorry, in a critical evaluation, or in a critical analysis or critical appraisal, a literary critic has to cater to both language and meaning. Now, there are three approaches, as you can see here, and this is our main topic. Whenever we pick up a piece of literature, be it a novel, fiction, or be it a kind of poetry, an ode, a sonnet, an elegy, an epic, or it can be a ballad, narrative poetry, lyrical poetry, or it can be a play, tragedy, comedy. All these are known as literary pieces or literary text. So there are three approaches. Approach number one is known as linguistics. Now, these two approaches, I always call them extremist, because they are lopsided. They are tilted to one side. Like linguistics give prominence to code only, while literary criticism, that is traditional approach, it just focuses on meaning and message. It almost neglects the other area known as code or language, figurative language, literary devices, parallelism, deviations. All these are not given much prominence by literary critics. So, and when we talk about linguists, they deal with linguistic data. The more emphasis is given to code. When I say code, I mean linguistic data, and little emphasis is given to meaning or message. So they spotlight code. So we can say they are much tilted towards language of the literary text. Now, literary critics, literary criticism, that is traditional approach, they are quite biased for message or content and ideas, theme. So more emphasis on message or theme. You can contrast more emphasis on code and more emphasis on message. So little emphasis or spotlight is given to code. Now, in order to mediate between these two extreme viewpoints, a third approach has been brought, known as stylistics. This approach says that both code and language, both code and message are important. Both deserve equal emphasis. So this gives equal emphasis to both code and message. While linguistics give emphasis to code and literary criticism gives emphasis to message. But stylistics, which is a branch of applied linguistics, and this stylistics or stylisticians, they say that both content and message are important. But what is the difference? The difference is, first they foreground the code, they bring in the foreground, in front of, they give prominence to code first and explain all the literary devices and parallelism and deviations, and then they talk about a message. So code is foregrounded and message is backgrounded, and it does not mean that message is neglected. They are of the view that if a reader is reading a literary piece in a foreign language, so the first difficulty he or she comes across is of code. So code, the meaning is embedded and hidden in the code. Unless this code is unraveled, unless this code is interpreted or made easy, so reader will not be able to get at the meaning or message. So what do? They explain all the parallelisms, all the deviations, and then they leave the text bare for the reader. Now reader can handle the text as if it were written in his or her mother tongue, or L1, or language 1. So this approach to literary texts is a new one, innovative, and I think it is it has got much classroom implications. Even we teachers, educators, we explain all the similes, metaphors, literary devices, Latinism, archaicism, and then the meter and the inverted syntax and figurative language. All this explained. All these, and even the structure, genre, like we usually teach students that this is an epic, this is a ballad, this is a lyric, etc. So once this all has been explained, then the meaning is quite visible. Now the reader can get at the meaning or message. So let's wind up that there are three approaches to literary text as far as critical evaluation is concerned, or practical criticism is concerned. So one is linguistics approach, the second one is literary approach, literary criticism approach, and third one is stylistic approach. And stylisticians seem to present a balanced view, a balanced approach, because they to them both are important, code as well as message. So both code and code mean form, both code and form, both code and message have importance, and they must be discussed and given equal weight in the analysis of literary text. But they can be prioritized, like code or can be foregrounded and brought into prominence, and it should be discussed first, and later on content may be discussed. Thank you very much for watching this video. Although I don't teach literature, still I have a taste in literary studies. So I thought that today I should record a lecture for students of literature, and I should introduce them to three approaches to literary pieces. Hope although there are still few things which I didn't discuss at length, because I don't want my video to exceed more than 20 to 25 minutes, and I'll be taking up more such issues related to literature or linguistics, and I'll be recording my videos on them. You are requested to subscribe this channel and also press the bell icon so that you are notified whenever I upload a new video. The name of the channel is Rustam's Way of Learning English. Thank you very much.